As of 8 a.m. this morning, Thursday, the 14th of October, there have been 896 PCR tests since the last report on Wednesday morning. And of these, there are 4 positives in travellers exiting quarantine and 12 positives from the community, which include 4 children. Within those community members, there are some adults which are not connected to the school outbreaks. There have been 109,919 vaccinations in total across the Cayman Islands, and of these there are 55,780 which are first doses, representing 78% of the 71,106 estimated population. 53,365 people have completed the 2-dose course, which represents 75% of the population, and 774 people have had a 3rd or booster dose, which represents approximately 4% of those people over the age of 50. Since the 8th of September, there have been a total of 188 people who have been positive in the community. This is on a background of 25,203 tests, so we can see that 25,000 tests since that time have also been negative. As of yesterday, we had a total of 184 cases that are prevalent in the community, giving us a 0.26% prevalence positive rate. The booster program is from today open to anybody over the age of 60. Please can I remind anybody that feels they need some assistance, a community member who perhaps might be bedbound or who finds it difficult to leave home, to let public health know, because they will be able to come out into the community to provide that booster dose. We have a combination of both the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccines available for use, so please let people know if you have a particular preference to have the AstraZeneca, as we have a smaller number of these doses. You will be aware that the government is planning a rollout of lateral flow tests nationally, and the policy related to this will be advised to the public in due course. It hasn't yet been finalized. I'm also planning now, as a little surprise event, to give Donna a lateral flow test so that everybody can see on camera how this is done. First of all, do our hands cleansing, please, and then we'll get the test kit out. It is a relatively quick process. I hope you're able to hear me okay. There's a little hole here, which I'm just going to punch out, a pre-formed hole in the card. And there's a tube of liquid here, which I'm going to place into that little hole. I really need 3 hands rather than just the ordinary 2. And Donna, if you take that swab, okay, and then rotate it in one nostril, putting it in 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, just up there, okay, twirl it around 5 times. Okay. And then please do the same in the other time, 5 times, a good generous 5 times, nothing half-hearted. Thank you. Okay, it's all good. And then I'm going to give you the tube and ask you to do the next bit. Okay. You take the tube and then twirl it around in there for 30 seconds. And we're going to hope that 30 seconds have passed. We haven't timed it exactly. And then as you're taking the swab out, if you squeeze the tube, so you hold back all the liquid, and then I'll put the little lid on there for you to put on the top. Okay. And you can put that thing without touching me into there. Dispose of it in the biohazard bag. Put that on. Yep. Okay. And then put 4 drops into the S. That's I'll just show everybody the strip. 4 drops into the S. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then put that into the biohazard bag. Okay. And then in 15 minutes, one of the press will time it for us. We'll come and have a look at the result.
Okay, that's it. All right, Dr. Lee, if that's it for you at this point, we're now going to go to His Excellency, or Premier Panton, actually.
Thank you very much, Donna, and thank you, Dr. Lee, for that very able demonstration of the ease of use and convenience of the lateral flow tests that we will be detailing more fully, as Dr. Lee indicated.
Good night, everyone in the Cayman Islands. You're watching the CMR COVID Spotlight Show. I'm Kevin Watler, and Sandy Hill is in the background, and she's gonna taking a look at the comments that you might have that are coming in, and she's going to come up every now and then. But you just saw a little bit of the press briefing that happened in the Cayman Islands this afternoon, where obviously we got some of the latest data. But now we actually have an epidemiologist who's a data scientist who took some of the available data and started to predict some of what the Cayman Islands can expect. So I'm going to bring on Dr. Edwin Michael. Welcome, Dr. Edwin, Dr. Michael.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Kevin. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great to be on.
So, Dr. Michael, would you just share with everyone a little bit about what you do and just give them your verbal CV?
Yeah. Well, I'm an epidemiologist, as you indicated, but I'm also a disease modeler, and that's my specialty, and I've been modeling diseases since my PhD, times. And, I come from England and from Imperial College. And so, I come from that group that does all the, the major modeling, including COVID. So I came to the US 10 years ago. I went to Notre Dame. And I normally model vector-borne diseases, tropical diseases. That's been what I've been doing until March 2020, and then COVID hit, right? So we had all the tools ready. It's just a matter of changing the models. And at that time, when we started modeling COVID, my group and I, we noticed that, normally at that time, we only had models at the national or at most at the state level here in the US. And so many of the local people were asking for predictions at the county level. So we started building this computational system that can take data at the county level. Johns Hopkins were already publishing, county level case data and death data. And we take those data and we calibrate our models, and we calibrate it sequentially. So we're updating the model. It's just like weather predictions. So weather models are big dynamical systems models with many parameters, and they use incoming data to update the parameters so that the forecast can be made more and more reliable. So it's the same. And if you look at COVID, many of the conditions that drive transmission keep changing very rapidly through time. So you can't start with a static model with fixed parameters, to make the forecast in the future, because that will not capture changing conditions on the ground, compliance with social measures, those kinds of things. So we needed to build a system that can estimate changes into people's compliance, with social measures, input that into the model, and then also the model should have enough structure to take into account vaccinations, breakthrough infections, and then the variants. So you'll see when I start, it's a very complicated model. And the data science will be to go and collect the data. And let me give a shout out to Kenneth Newcomb. He's joining us, he's watching us. He's the postdoc on this particular project, and he's a data scientist as well. So he goes and he develops code to go automatically pull down data from Johns Hopkins, et cetera, and then we fit the model, and we use the latest fitted models to make forecasts into the future. So that's what we've been doing since March 2020 for all the counties in the US. But then July 2020, I moved to USF, and then we've been focusing on Florida, mostly.
You've been extremely helpful. That's how I got to meet you.
Yeah.
through my role at the health department. And I mean, it's unbelievable what some of the data that you provided at the local level, that it allowed us to be able to really focus our efforts in order. And I'm telling you, in my opinion, sir, you are a hero, because a lot of the things that you have shared with us really saved a lot of lives. I just know it because you were able to kind of help predict certain things that would have happened, so we could again use some of the different measures and focus some of our public health efforts in order to just do some extra outreach in areas that we knew were more vulnerable, and some areas that we knew that might have caused some more issues. So thank you so much for that amazing brain of yours. And so I've asked you to do some modeling for the Cayman Islands based on the available data. And I got to really stress the importance of ensuring that we have data, because ultimately, if we don't have data, we're not able to do exactly a good job at creating something or creating an accurate picture.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. So can I start?
Absolutely. Go ahead and pop up your screen, and Sandra, if you could bring that up, and let's see what you came up with for the Cayman Islands.
Okay. So let me just pull up. Can you see it?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay. The full screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So like I said, this is group work, and it's led by myself, obviously, but the work is done by Ken Newcomb. I mean, he's a chemical engineer who got into disease modeling only March 2020, and it's been tremendous to see how he's really come along. And I think what you said, what really helped us is actually interacting with health professionals like yourself, because we learn a lot about the questions that you're asking. So with that, let me start looking at Cayman Islands. So where are we in Cayman Islands? So there are two parts to what we did. Kevin, when you approached us, like usual, we wanted to see what is the current state of the pandemic. Can we explain why cases are rising, or current the trends in current data? So what would be the factors behind that? And then we also make forecasts into the future and ask the question, where is the pandemic going? What kind of behavior can we expect? And in relation to Cayman Islands, we were focused on when will the pandemic end? Because you're on an island, and it's much easier. So the convention says it might be easier to control a pandemic in a closed population, like an island, compared to the states in the US, which are open. People migrate in and out. So we were very intrigued to see what we can learn from a closed population. This is the model. Like I said, it's quite complicated. This is what is known as a compartmental model, and I'm sure most of you have heard about this kind of modeling. In a compartmental model, and this is normally applied to viruses, bacterial infections, those kinds of infections, what we call as microparasites. You divide the population into susceptible, exposed, in this case for COVID, and then the infected classes. And the infected classes can be very complicated. And then normally people will lose the infection as they become immune, and you go into the recovered class, okay? So the flow is this: susceptible, you come into contact with some of the infectious people, and then you become exposed. And in COVID, it's a peculiar thing is most people, will become infectious asymptomatic. No signs of disease at all, but they're infectious. These are the hidden infections. And those people who hold infection for a particular 1 or 2 weeks, and then they lose infection and go into a recovered class. The other pathway is the clinical pathway. So you become pre-symptomatic, symptomatic, mild cases, and then hospitalization cases, and then you go into ICU, and then you might die. And you can recover from each of those cases and become immune as well. But look at the complications here, right? There's restricted movement. When the lockdowns, we have to model that. Some of the susceptibles are no longer exposed. They go into a restricted movement class. And then in the US, I'm sure in the Cayman Islands, this may not be a major problem, but they are vaccine-refusing people. That's another class as well. And then we have the vaccinated groups. And if you look at the vaccinated groups, you get the first dose, second dose, and the second dose will begin to lose this efficacy. We need to model that. And then, we are in preparing for the third booster right now. The equations are being put in place. The problem with the vaccination is that, which we need to track, is that vaccines are not 100%, so they are less than 100% effective. So breakthrough infections can occur, right? You can lose your infection, get exposed, and then you become infected or get into the clinical pathway. And the other thing to note also is, now we have the original virus, and then we have the alpha virus and delta virus. So we can model all of them, provided we get information on the different strains in the population. For Cayman Islands, we didn't have that information, so we collapsed the whole lot together and estimate a common transmission rate. Okay, so that is the model. It's quite complicated. And so models need parameters, right? Those alpha, delta, all those things are parameters in the model. You need values for those parameters, and only then you can make simulations. So where do you get the parameters? So what we do is we fit the model to data, and then we take the best fitting models and then estimate the parameters, that way. And this is known as data model assimilation. We have a dynamic model, but we couple the model with data, or we confront the model with data, and that allows us to choose the best fitting model for any situation. And the other thing we do is also sequential calibration. And it's best explained here. This is, let's say, accumulative cases. And this was, I think, when we started Indiana, in the US. Suppose you only fit to the first 40% of the data, which is the dark, circles. That is where the model was fitted, and then we use the fitted model to make forecasts into the future. You see, the forecast is not capturing what actually emerged, in the future. So what if you fit the next block of 20% of data up to 60% of the data? Now the model is capturing the future, but there's a great deal of variation. If you sequentially then further update the model, let's say up to 80% of the data, now you're reducing the variance. And then, so on and so forth. If you get the latest data, you can get very good fit. And this is the principle that we use, a sequential Monte Carlo based calibration. Monte Carlo is important because we start with, I think it's about 20,000 models, and then we select about 250 models, which are best fitting to the data. And we use that 250 models, which are calibrated to data to, the latest data that we have. We use that model to make forecasts into the future. So where do we stand? This is the data for Cayman Islands. If we got that data from, this is stopping me. Okay, from coronavirus.app. That tracks data from all across the world. Countries from all across the world. And that's where we got the Cayman Islands confirmed case data, right? Very little cases. You've done a fantastic job with the social measures, that were implemented. But lately, cases are rising. And the model, if you look at the black curve there, that is the median of the model fits, right? It tracks the data pretty well. And now, both the model predictions, this is with current social measures and current vaccination rate, the model is predicting that we are maybe on the verge of a coming slide. It's not a big wave, but certainly much bigger than previous waves that occurred. Not waves, I would say, uptick in cases, in Cayman Islands. It's going to be much bigger, and the peak will occur December 11th. And you'll have about 30 daily cases, the median cases. But this is the confidence interval, so that could go up, more than 100 cases, given the uncertainty in the data. Okay, so that's where we stand right now. But after the peak, the models are saying it'll start decaying, and we'll see when it'll start fade out. When will it fade away or end? And this is assuming that immunity is long-term. We'll see what happens when immunity wanes. This is, I'm showing, are we at a place where you can fully release all social measures? And the answer is no. It's still quite dangerous. You'll get a very large wave. A large is relative, right? 430 cases at peak. But
you're saying we should not be like the UK and say, we'll declare it all free, do what you want.
Yes, exactly. You drop all guys so that the economy is fully opened. And this is under the current vaccination rate, right? All you're dropping is the social measures, a full release of social measures. Immediately you'll get a spike, and it'll peak at 430 daily cases, and the peak will occur November 24th, about 6 weeks from now, so to speak, if that were the case. So this is saying that it is too dangerous right now to have a full release. So we'll see when you can have a full release later on as we go through the talk. So what are the factors behind the recent flare-up, this flare-up? Why is this occurring? Why didn't it occur, previously? Why are we seeing this? Because as you say, Cayman Islands got a fantastic vaccination rate. So we were puzzled as well. And we are seeing this also in Vermont, in many other states in the US with very high vaccination rates. So why, you would have thought with the vaccination rate, we should be safe, right? But why is this occurring? So we were a little bit intrigued to see why that is so. This is looking at protection from social measures, very high protection in April. I think that was a major lockdown. And then about 90% protection. And then it started dropping, and then it's trended, a slight increase in protection. Right now it's about 55%. Protection due to social measures. And this could be mask wearing, physical distancing, or any stay-at-home orders, right? All of them combined. So you got 55% protection, but lately protection has been increasing steadily, although there's a lot of fluctuations. And this is model estimate, but we are informed by Google Trends search term data. People have searched for COVID, and then we look at what percentage of people have been asking questions about COVID, and this is for Cayman Islands, right? And we use that data to act as priors for our model, and then the model will actually estimate what the protection is. So, the model is informed by some behavior which is changing on the ground. And the red line or curve is the transmission rate. If you see, transmission rate has been steadily increasing. There are wild fluctuations, but transmission rate is increasing. So we were really intrigued. Why is transmission rate increasing? Social measures are increasing, right? Protection. But why is that should actually have a negative impact on transmission rate. But transmission rate is increased, and that is the reason why you're getting the resurgence, the slight uptick in cases. So we wanted to find out why that is so, this is really unexpected. One of the reasons is if you look at daily changes in daily vaccination rates, that has shown a steady decline since February. That was the peak, and then it slowly declined, and now you're trundling along 40 vaccinations per day. And this is data that we get from coronavirus.app and also our worldindata.org, and they provide COVID vaccination data, daily vaccination data, from countries around the world. And that's what we've been using. It might be that you have much better data, and we can talk about that later on, but this is what we use. So vaccination rate has declined, and that could be one of the reasons why you're getting a rise in the transmission rate, despite the fact that social measures, protective measures are going up. This is an interesting thing that we found out, right? And this is the impact of breakthrough infections on new cases. What is the contribution of breakthrough infections to, comprising, giving rise to the new cases? And what we are seeing is this. This is, the contribution of breakthrough infections to new cases, and that has steadily increased, recently from February when you've started the vaccination, end of January, February vaccination. And now we are currently 44% of all new cases, according to the model, are due to breakthrough infections in the vaccinated people. So they are contributing infections. This is a fraction of non-breakthrough cases. That is dropping, right? Most of the cases are now, very soon, I think in November 10th, I think is where the tipping points are. Soon it'll be the majority of new cases will be due to breakthrough cases. And that is interesting. Most of the new cases are coming from breakthrough cases. And so we wondered whether that is causing the change, the rise in transmission rate. This is the ratio of infected people to the susceptible people. And this is important because that tells you how much contacts is occurring between infected and susceptible people. The higher this ratio, more contacts are occurring, and that will drive an increase in transmission rate. And that is exactly what has happened. The blue solid line is the ratio infected and divided by susceptible. This is susceptibles are collapsing. This is the infected class, right? These are all proportions. If you look at the ratio is increased. There are more infected compared to the susceptible, because susceptibles are also shrinking. This is susceptibles, they are shrinking, but cases are being produced. And those infectious cases are coming from breakthrough infections. So it is breakthrough infections which is driving the current uptick in cases. And that makes sense, right? Because the vaccination started, let's say in February onwards, 8 months later, this is when you should see the impact of breakthrough infections. So that ties in nicely with, what we know about the immunity due to vaccines beginning to wane. So that is what we think is driving the current uptick in cases. Now let's cast our eye into what is the long-term cause of the pandemic. When will this pandemic end in Cayman Islands? Like I said in this beginning, Cayman Islands is an island community. Therefore, it's a closed population. You can stop people from coming in. So therefore, this should burn out very quickly, so to speak. Especially given the immunity rates that Cayman Islands has been able to achieve. So we need to keep an eye in order to make the forecast for the long term, what is happening with herd immunity, right? And is herd immunity long term or not? This is going to drive what might happen over the long term. So once again, two fractions of people in Cayman Islands. One is the susceptible group of people. The other one is the total fraction, immune fraction of people. The black curve is the immunity, fraction of people who are immune. Currently, look at what happened since January. It is really, started increasing really fast. And currently, 82.8% of the population are immune. Remember, this is coming from both vaccination as well as from infection. Okay, in Cayman Islands, we'll come to that in a minute. And then if you look at herd immunity, we're estimating for Cayman Islands to be at 84.5%, and that'll occur October 22nd. So it's a week away, you'll hit herd immunity if the current trends, continues. With the current vaccination rate and the current social measures, this is what we are expecting. And this is with the full release, not much. Normally we'll have a big impact because full release means more cases, therefore more immune people will arise faster. It does after a particular lag, but it's not making a big difference in terms of when it'll allow us to reach herd immunity. And that is because we are already 82.8% immune and herd immunity is only 2% away, so very close. So that's not making a big impact. This is really interesting. This is comparing vaccine conferred immunity, the fraction of people who are immune because of the vaccine, and the fraction of people who are immune because of natural immunity. That is, these are the people who got infected, lost the infection, and recovered and became immune. Most of the immunity in Cayman Islands, 79% currently, about 80% are due to vaccine-induced immunity. Only 3% is coming from infections. And that is a testimony to the very strong social measures which were practiced in Cayman Islands. So social measures, protected the susceptible people, but the problem with that is they remain susceptible, right? They got very little infections. So very little acquired immunity coming from natural infections. Most of your immunity is vaccine induced. Now, this is very interesting because latest reports are saying there might be differences between vaccine-induced immunity and natural immunity. And we will show some simulations later on. So we need to bear this in mind, right? So let's move on. So now we are asking when can we predict that the pandemic will fade out? Like I said, 250 models, are what we select and make the forecast about, and this is the variation that you're seeing. Now, because you got 250 models, we can work out the probability of elimination, and the inverse of that is probability of resurgence, right? So that is by looking at how many of the 250 curves go to extinction, 0, and how many will actually recover. So the blue line here is the probability of elimination. And if you look at with the current social measures and vaccination, you'll hit 95% chance of elimination on February 4th, 2022. That's what we are forecasting. The first week of February, you'll have only 5% chance of resurgence. After that, the chance of resurgence will become smaller and smaller, meaning the chance of elimination will increase, so you can become safe. Okay, so before that, right now, if you look at it, we are about 50% maybe chance of elimination. So it's very risky. You need to hit about 90 or 95%. That's when you can say we can fully reopen the economy. So that is the date that we are forecasting with current social measures. If you've released all social measures from today onwards, you will reach that November 4th. That is because the infection will burn through the remaining susceptibles. And I didn't forgot to point out, that is about 17% are currently still susceptible. They will burn through the susceptibles and then they will decline very quickly. And because of that, you will reach elimination much earlier, November 4th, 2021. But the trade-off is a lot of people are going to get infected. Look at the numbers here. At peak, we're hitting 700 people. Compared to the current social measures, the peak is like, not peak, some of the curves can go up to about 140 or so. Here, some of the curves can go up to about 700, just above 700. So that is the trade-off.
Just to clarify that, so you're saying that the risk, if we just continue, just to completely open up, of sometime in the not so distant future, having somewhere between 700 to 800 people possibly hospitalized, getting infected, as opposed to if we kind of slowly, methodically open up slow over time, you're looking at somewhere around no more than about 100 to 150 people becoming sick and hospitalized. Or so.
That is at the extreme. Remember, the median is much lower. If you go with the median, this is the median prediction. This black line here, only 30 cases. What I'm showing you is this variance, each of those curves, right?
Got it.
And this median is only 430, but you can go up to 700. Here, the median is 30, but you can go up to 100 over here. See?
If you're planning for doomsday, you plan for the worst case scenario, but you're looking somewhere in the middle, it's kind of where it will probably fall. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there are, and the other thing about full release that, maybe we don't appreciate is that full release will allow you to get to acquired immunity faster. Okay, in theory, right? Because a lot of people they get infected and then they recover and become immune. That can occur faster. That's why your chance of elimination is can occur much earlier as well.
And
so
it's always a trade-off. Increasing and overwhelming your hospital system.
Yes, but you will overwhelm your hospitals. So that is a dangerous way of getting herd immunity, in other words. The safer way is through vaccination. I want to end with another caveat is this. What if immunity is not long-term? All this is predicated on the fact that immunity is long-term. Yeah, all those results until now. This is what will happen if immunity were to wane and does not operate over the long term. And here we're showing, first of all, no waning of immunity. This is what I've been talking about. It'll decline and fade away. And like I said, February, with current social measures, you can safely reopen, in February. If you full release, it'll be dangerous, but you can reopen after November, November 4th. But what if immunity is not long-term? What if immunity was very short-term? Over 1 year, it wanes. you'll get a very big spike. This is a median, right? Not the confidence interval. The median is now above 120. And look at what happens. It oscillates. This is classical for this kind of models. It'll just start oscillating. It'll become a cyclical, periodic resurgence, and then a trough, resurgence. The peak will depend. We'll come back to that in a minute. What if it's 2.5 years? Longer term. This is the curve. The size will reduce, because you have immunity which is acting over the longer term. The size will immediately fall. But another interesting thing is the inter-wave period will also lengthen. What if it's 5 years? Look at what happens. It'll just decay. It's almost following the curve where immunity is long term. So in a nutshell, what will happen is once immunity is waning, what happens is all the recovered people, the immune people, will become susceptible, and that will cause they will be the fuel for this kind of cyclical oscillations. So the system will settle down to something like flu. Flu's got seasonality as well, but normally this is what happens. You get oscillations. It could settle into an endemic state. But this is the interesting one, right? Remember I said vaccine-induced immunity may be different from naturally acquired immunity. Currently, like I said, 80% natural vaccine-induced immunity in Cayman Islands. And let's say vaccine, I think, there's a lot of debate, and they say the natural immunity might be stronger, may last longer than vaccine-induced. If that is the case, this is what happens for Cayman Islands. You'll get a spike, because most of your immunity is a weaker kind of immunity, inverted commas, because of vaccine-induced. I mean, this needs to be confirmed, obviously, but all we're showing is that if you have, differential effects from vaccine-induced and natural immunity, then you can get this kind of, circles as well. For example, if this were reversed, these numbers, 79% were natural immunity, only 3%, then this will be suppressed. So those are the unknowns. All we can say is if immunity is not long-term, we should expect this to occur. And this is looking at the fraction of people who are immune. Look at what happens over 1 year. This is herd immunity line, right? You'll never reach herd immunity. So the recovered population will begin to lose their immunity and go into the susceptible class. And the susceptibles will begin to grow, and that will fuel this kind of curves that I showed you. This is over 2.5. Once again, you're increasing the fraction of people who are immune at peak, but you're never reaching herd immunity. Even with 5 years, you'll never reach herd immunity. Because you'll never reach herd immunity, there will be a lot of susceptibles. And as long as there are some infected people, you will get this kind of cyclical oscillations. So that's what we've done so far, Kevin. I think in conclusion, what we can say is you're not ready yet to reopen. But if immunity is long-term, you might be able to reopen towards the end of the year safely and not overwhelm the hospitals. And then the last thing is go get the boosters, because just to safeguard against these breakthrough infections, but among the vaccinated, and also for this, the impact of waning immunity, because getting the booster will increase, not only restore your immunity, but will also enhance your immunity, make it stronger. And then the other thing is, if you get the booster, you're also going to produce diversified immune response, especially in the antibody response. And that is a good protection against mutants. I'll stop there.
One of the things that I just want to remind everyone as well, too, is that this is based on the data that we have available. Of course, you need no more data to start to put in other realistic things, which is when the borders do reopen as well. and then we have unknown type of how many people are going to be coming into the island,
That's
that
it.
will also change a lot of these things. So
Absolutely.
you want to just, before we get to some questions that we have some people starting to ask some questions, can you explain what type of data would be required to really do some more better predictions? I know you started off saying that, that it could change over time.
Yeah.
It's not something that you show one time and then that's it.
No.
You have to
No.
also evolve with as things start to change. You take
Yes.
those observations, you put that data in, and then you see where we are. But what data would you really need to do even a better job at showing exactly what's going to likely happen?
Yeah. The first thing is, we have taken 7-day averages because it's crazy fluctuations in the reported cases. Several days, zero cases, and then suddenly cases are dumped on a particular day. That makes it very difficult. It just increases the variance in the model. If you can get daily cases from the Department of Health, that will help immensely with the modeling. That's the first thing. And perhaps from now onwards, we need to track that kind of data. The second thing is, in terms of scenarios of reopening, how many, I think Cayman Islands, the biggest thing would be the number of tourists, that you can allow into the island, or what do you expect the rate of tourists, coming into Cayman Islands, the daily rate, how long are they going to visit? So those are the information, and then the policy, which is, are you only going to allow double vaccinated people? So with that kind of information, we have done simulations, surrounding the Super Bowl here in Tampa, which occurred in February. So we have the equations, but we need this kind of data, to really make some realistic predictions. And the third thing is, about the variants. We were not able to find any variant specific data for Cayman Islands. So we need that kind of data as well, alpha, delta, whatever, that you have. And then the last thing that we lack is hospitalization data. We couldn't find anywhere. But I think maybe, Kevin, you might have sent.
Yeah, I sent some stuff. However, they don't show a running track of previous stuff. They only show you what's happening today, how many are hospitalized as of right now. I will tell you, we have not had a lot of people hospitalized. It's really been nil. We went up to 3 just recently, and most of the cases, and I know you mentioned breakthrough cases is kind of what you might think we're needing some of the stuff. A lot of the outbreaks we're seeing are in ineligible people, children. Most of the outbreaks are happening within the school settings. So again, we're going to ask you to come back and do some updated stuff. Once we have some more data, I'm going to really reach out and see if we can get some more data so we could do another adjustment. But just wanted to make sure we kind of showed where we are as of right now based on what is available. But ultimately, we really need that data to do something even more comprehensive and thorough, so people could really understand some of the real risks and how we could really, or what we could really expect.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think Cayman Islands is on a really good wicket in a way, because you reach very high levels of immunity.
Agreed.
And that is and you only got 17% of people who are susceptible. So we need to work, try and those may be mostly kids, right?
Yes,
so when the
most of them are
vaccines come for the kids, that will change rapidly.
Yep, and we know that should be hopefully coming pretty soon. So that's something, we got to encourage every parent to get their children vaccinated. But Sandra, I'm going to actually turn it over to you to kind of get people who are asking questions or making comments answered. And again, if you do want to ask your question directly to Dr. Edwin, you could certainly, you see the link in the little thing at the bottom. You could just go to that website, and then we will actually be able to bring you live into the show where you could ask your questions, especially if you think it's going to have a little back and forth. So Sandra, take it away.
Okay, folks, good evening to everyone. Rachel's up first, and Rachel's question is, can we look at neighboring territories like Bermuda, who have similar populations to Cayman and 66% vaccinated, for an idea of Cayman's future?
That is a really good question. And the short answer is, yes, we can do that, but we are short-staffed. So I don't want to promise anything. But that is, yeah, I mean, we can, short answer, and we can learn a lot across the islands, and I think we also need to learn from what has happened and with the decisions which were made in order to prepare ourselves for future pandemics as well. So I think that needs to be done, in the future. And if you can get together all the islands and allow them to, or get them to share the data, we could, start looking at that as well.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. MP Thomas Christopher is joining us, and he says great information. And he said to Rachel that was a good question. The variables change once travelers, local and non-local, begin. Wee, thank you so much for tuning in. Rachel is also asking that we understand we had no transmission because we extinguished the virus amongst the community and only quarantined travelers were testing positive. Then in August, people broke quarantine and now we have the virus amongst us. Is this now in doubt? So I think just for some background information, Dr. Edwin, essentially what happened is we thought that we had zero COVID in the community. And recently we've had a number of community cases. How likely is it that we really had zero COVID all of this time since early last year?
I mean, that's not what the models are saying. And also the data is just not, I mean, there is very low level of infection throughout, very low level of infection. So there might be hot spots of infections, across the island.
Right.
Communities, for whatever reason, they are hotspots. And so I think that has kept transmission going. Of course, if we have people coming in, breaking quarantine and things, that is only going to add fuel, to the fire, so to speak. So, yeah, good question. I mean, like I said, we just have to go back in time to tease out what has actually happened.
So in all likelihood, then we've had transmission all this time. It just wasn't apparent. And it just sort of coincidentally popped up because the first case that we realized of local transmission wasn't a person that even had any COVID symptoms. It was an elderly person who was hospitalized for other reasons. And because the hospital tests people before admitting them for COVID-19, she was discovered. And then once they started contact tracing, it kind of blossomed out from there.
Yeah, so that's a good point, because what I didn't mention is the ratio of asymptomatic cases to symptomatic cases is about 2. So you should expect a lot of silent infections out there. So that might be what you observed, and if most of the silent infections are among young people, they're not going to show up in the hospital. Because they are completely asymptomatic. Like my daughter got COVID. She was running all over the place. There was no problems whatsoever. So that might have been the case as well.
Okay. All right. Robin makes the point that Bermuda has a very different demographic. They're not like Cayman at all. Mr. Thomas is asking, how? I don't know if that question's answered here, but COVID goes for those who are unvaccinated is an equal opportunity killer. So can you address this point? This continues to come up, vaccinated versus unvaccinated. People say, well, does it really matter if you get vaccinated if at the end of the day, everyone is going to get COVID and the vaccine doesn't prevent you or stop you from actually getting the virus?
No, I mean, yes. I mean, this question comes out in the US, as you can imagine as well. But if you look at all the data among vaccinated and unvaccinated, I'm talking the total vaccinated and unvaccinated, breakthrough infections are only about less than 2%. If you divide I showed you about the new cases. If you look at new cases, it's true, the breakthrough infections from unvaccinated is beginning to become dominant for new cases. But if you divide the breakthrough cases among all the people vaccinated, take the proportion, then you'll see it is tiny. It's less than 2%. So the vaccines are still holding, are still protective. And most of the new cases in the US, more than 95%, of cases, are coming from the unvaccinated. If you look at it proportionately, Most of that are coming from the unvaccinated. So you have to look at proportion as well. Then simply focus on what fraction of new cases are coming by, breakthrough infections among vaccinated, because that is the dominant group now in many parts of the world. The vaccinated are the dominant group. So you would expect most of the cases, because of the vaccines are not 100%, to come from the vaccinated group, because the pure susceptible fraction of the population have declined, and unvaccinated, poor susceptible population have declined. So you'll get to see among the new infections, the proportion coming from unvaccinated to be more or less equal with the vaccinated. But if you look at the overall population, vaccinated people are 80% of, in some places are vaccinated. And if you divide the breakthrough infection from, just cases divided by total vaccinated, it's tiny. And I think people miss that point. That shows that vaccines are incredibly protective. For me, I'm astounded that it's still holding up against the mutants.
Yeah, people are looking at some of the data and not really understanding how to actually read the data. And then that just gives fuel to a lot of people who are saying, well, look at this. You got vaccinated, you got it, and not really looking at it and putting it into perspective.
Yes.
And the sad situation is someone that did the right thing and got vaccinated, and they might get the virus, very low chance, but they still might get the virus, and then unfortunately pass it on to someone who is not vaccinated, and then we have problems.
Yeah. So, I think that we need to counter, and that is only by, showing the data. Let's look at the fraction of people who got breakthrough infections among all the people who got vaccinated in Cayman Islands. You'll see the proportion is tiny. Because you got nearly about 70% vaccinated now.
It's actually more than that. I'm going to pull up the latest.
Yeah.
Yes.
So look at the cases, about 30, right? Of which about half will be breakthrough, let's say. So we're talking about 15 cases divided by the 70% of Cayman Islands is what? I forget now. The Cayman Islands.
75 fully vaccinated. The total population is 71,106.
Exactly.
And then, 78% of people have at least one dose.
Yeah. So you divide, 15 cases on a daily basis coming from the vaccinated. Divide that by, 75. Let's say 75% times 70,000. It's tiny. So that is the kind of information that we need to roll out. And if you look at the fraction who are susceptible, that is decline. So proportionately, they make a bigger contribution.
Right. And this has been, to put it in further perspective, the most recent cases have largely been at children as well. So we've got some additional questions. Katie says, so the number of breakthrough cases now is happening because the early vaccinated people need a booster.
Yes,
so she's asking about that.
Yeah, exactly. Because this is now what we are seeing 8 months from the first vaccines, right? And this is when we should expect to see the impact of breakthrough cases. And that is what the models are showing, and that ties in with what we know about the waning of vaccine-induced immunity. So the boosters are the answer. Yes, Katie, that's exactly right.
Okay. Rachel says we have hardly any people with natural immunity, acquired immunity here. 3.2%. She said, wow, because we locked down and extinguished the virus and are now almost wholly reliant on vaccine-created immunity. But of course, you said that that's a good thing, because if you try to acquire natural immunity, you're going to have people dying. You're going to have your healthcare system burdened beyond, anything that it can probably handle.
Yeah, and so that was always the case, right? One theory was let it burn through the population.
Right.
It's mostly among young people, they're not going to get sick, so that will contribute to herd immunity. The UK was tinkering with that, early on, and they got, and then they were bounced into vaccination.
They got a reality check and said, no, bad idea. Backpedal.
Yeah, and then they backpedaled quickly. But Sweden tried that as well, and there's no difference, right? And Sweden paid the price with deaths, which is what was predicted. So lockdowns are great because it stops infected person meeting a susceptible, right? Because by mask or stay at home, whatever. But the problem is you're leaving a huge population susceptible. And that is the reason why we had these waves in the US, because a lot of people were still susceptible. And vaccination rates were very low, in May, June, July. And then you got this huge flare-ups.
Right.
Cayman Island is in a much better place because a lot of people have got immunity, vaccine-induced. My only worry is there a difference between vaccine-induced immunity and natural immunity? That is still up in the air. But the boosters will solve these problems. So go get the boosters is the short answer.
Right. Okay. And Michelle says that I do not necessarily agree with his ideology that the vast number of the people presently in Cayman are being immune, as the vaccine does not make us immune to the virus. It just lessens the effect or symptoms and possible/potential outcome for the individual who's immunized.
Yeah. So the trials were against, using vaccines against symptoms, right? So that is what the trials. But follow-up data, they looked at large scale, about 1 point something million people were followed up cohorts in the UK. And that is showing that the vaccines also protect against infection, not just against disease.
Right.
So that is where we are coming from, and that's how we parameterize our model, that there's a protective element as well against transmission, against getting infected.
And then there's,
yeah.
Sorry, doctor, I was going to say, I saw something recently come out on NPR this week that there's also new data that's showing that there's some protection in terms of transmitting it to other people, even if you get infected, but you're vaccinated.
Correct. Because your viral load is much lower. So I think the later studies, yes, I think some people were maybe not confused, but the trials were protection against disease symptoms. That was the basis of the trials, and I think that filtered through to a large proportion of the people, a lot of people. But the follow-up, they looked at protection against infection as well. And that was shown that they were also protective against infection, not just disease.
Okay, very interesting. Rachel says this is, we're not a discrete island community. We will have waves of new visitors coming in continually when we reopen. And that's the point, that we're trying to get ready to reopen. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Carolina, says, I'm interested to know what the predicted mortality rate would be for this burnout of the successful graph that estimated between 700 to 800 cases per day at its peak.
So the problem with modeling, we looked at that, trying to see whether we can model deaths. We can, using the parameters that we have from the US. Because the problem with COVID data is you only got 2 deaths, right, so far. And both of the deaths were not local, they were tourists or something, and that's what I heard. So it's very difficult to try and fit a model just having 2 deaths. So that's why I didn't show you the deaths predictions or the hospitalization predictions. But we have the parameters, but I was a little bit wary of doing those kinds of predictions because we don't have data to compare against. Yeah, that's you've done a fantastic job, Cayman Islands. 2 deaths, that's incredible that you managed to just 2 deaths, and those are not even Cayman Islands people. Those were tourists coming in, from the boats or whatever. And you should pat yourself on the back. You've done a fantastic job. Now, of course, the economy has taken a big hit. So we need to start looking at how can we reopen safely. If the tourists are coming double vaccinated with the vaccine passports, I think you can reopen, safely. So that's what I think. But we can model that as well to see.
And I think this is more of a maybe social concern, but having created this bubble, our government shut us down and has pretty much kept us locked for the most part. It has created this, on the one hand, expectation that we can remain in that state
Oh,
for a
right.
long period of time.
Yeah.
And then I think other people
Mm-hmm.
believe that, no one will die. So I think in some ways it fuels the anti-vaxxer mentality, because people say, well, does this thing really exist? Like, none of us have experienced the realities of COVID. We haven't seen a hospital system overburdened by it. We haven't had
Exactly.
anyone close to us die, neighbors, friends, any of that. So it's much more easier to remain in a psychological bubble, because we've created this physical bubble. Like, we've not had to deal with any of the realities of life with COVID.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because we modeled what happened in India, right? So the Indians were also boasting like anything in March, April. The prime minister was going around saying, "We have conquered COVID, and the rest of the world should learn from us." And then they dropped all social measures far too early, and vaccination rates were abysmal. About 3% of the people were vaccinated, with very low immunity. They reopened. They had elections. They had those huge religious gatherings, and bingo, exactly what the models were predicting. You had those huge waves, wave that took place in April, May in India. So that, I think, was a lesson to the rest of the world, that you don't mess with this virus, because it can spread. And if it's Delta variant, it can spread really fast. I mean, the R naught for Delta is about 5 to 6. That means one person can infect, 5 to 6 other people, and each of the 5 to 6 can infect another 5 to 6. So you get this huge exponential takeoff, for this virus. That didn't happen in Cayman Islands because of the social measures. But the interesting thing is how long, economies have to start reopening, livelihoods, those
Right.
things. So slowly we can, I think Cayman Islands, that's why Ken and I were really interested to see how Cayman Islands is doing, because you can control many things, right? You can close your borders to a large extent. And so so that's why we are interested to see when can you reopen, safely. And that's why we made those predictions about probability of elimination and things like that. So
All
I
right,
think,
we're pretty.
yeah,
Yep, my apologies. We're just about out of time, but I want to squeeze in
sure.
a few more questions. Al says government is indirectly pushing to get everyone vaccinated. When you take it, you need to sign a waiver that you're doing this freely. What is the percentage of people that have taken it and had negative results?
Negative results?
Yes, from the
Oh,
vaccine.
from adverse reactions, you mean?
Adverse reactions,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah. I think, if you look at the data on adverse reactions, I mean, it's pitiful. I mean, seriously. Yes, you get blood clots, with the AstraZeneca. That was a big thing, right? But with these mRNA vaccines, so far, there's hardly too much, that we know about serious adverse reactions. Don't forget, more than about 6 billion vaccines have been rolled out across the world. Where have we seen huge outbreaks, in terms of adverse reactions? Hardly anything. We will have heard by now. It is okay. Some people say we've not given it enough time, for the vaccinations to play out. But we've already, nearly a year into vaccinations, 8 to 9 months at least in the northern parts of the world, right? We're not seeing that in the hospitals and things like that, So these vaccines are historically, pretty safe. I mean, the only thing we know is what happened with AstraZeneca, with the blood clot, and JJ, vaccine as well has got that. And those are adenoviruses, right? It could be the way the vaccine was manufactured or something. But the mRNA vaccines so far have been very, safe.
Okay, let's see if we can grab maybe one or two more. Jerry wants to know, should we expect to have to keep taking a booster every 6 months?
Good question. Really good question. I mean, this, I get asked this all the time. Is this going to be the new normal, right? And yet we don't blink an eye when we go and get a vaccine for flu every year. Okay, so why is this such a major problem? I don't understand. And I'm going to get my booster on Saturday here in Tampa. I'm going to get it with my flu shot as well. So I think they're going to combine that, going forward. So when you take a flu vaccine, I think down the line, they'll mix it with coronavirus as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how this is going to play out,
Right. Carol is saying that she'd like to get her booster, but she's waiting on her age group for it to become available here.
Yes,
And
so for your knowledge, Dr. Michael, in the Cayman Islands, they only are giving boosters right now to 60 and older,
Yeah.
just based on availability and
Yeah.
trying to prioritize the more vulnerable group. And as time goes on, they'll certainly make adjustments.
In the US, I can come in because I can say I'm teaching kids, right? So
Yes.
highly vulnerable. So they accept
The way they wrote it in the United States, it really is almost anyone.
Yeah.
If you really, you could interpret it, and we're not asking questions. If you want to get
Exactly.
it, you'll get it.
Exactly. As long as you pass the 6-month
Correct.
duration, from the second dose, that's all I think they are looking at.
And over the age of 12, because
Yes.
of Pfizer.
okay, all right. Celine is waiting on her booster. Thomas says, please get vaccinated. We've lost 95 persons in Bermuda to COVID. And Nona is asking, has the COVID cases in India decreased? And if so, why?
Yeah, good question. So when the cases flared up, the central government was caught napping, right? They didn't have oxygen tanks, whatever, all kinds of things. And in India, we can never really say about the numbers. We don't know what is going on in rural areas. It's a huge country. And numbers are not their forte, shall we say. So we don't know what has happened, but many of the states took action. The states started clamping. They went into mini lockdowns for 1 or 2 months. So they cooled the pandemic, and then they started really ramping up the vaccinations. And that has caused the decline. But I worry about the numbers from India. God knows what's going on.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us in the program today. I think it was very, very interesting. I look forward to hopefully having you in the program again soon, and we can sort of move forward from there.
Yeah.
Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you. And good luck, Cayman. Well done. I mean, so far, but now we are getting into the tricky phase. How do you reopen? But with very high vaccination rates, you are, on a good wicket, as the cricketers keep saying.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. We'll definitely have you back on. I'll work on seeing if we could get some of the data that you would need. We'll figure that out, and we'll definitely do this again. So again, thank you, the people of the Cayman Islands. Really appreciate you being able to share your brain with us.
Nothing to do with brains. This is what we do, kind of thing. Yeah, but it was great to be on, and I just want to congratulate once again, Cayman Islands. 2 deaths. Come on, you should be really, really celebrating that the government actually stepped in and looked after people.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Dr. Edwin Michael, folks, epidemiologist and an expert at predictions and models, and he's given us a lot of food for thought. We'll definitely have him back on the program again as we progress forward through the pandemic. And I wish you guys a wonderful evening. Kevin, thank you so much. Another fantastic show.
Thank you. Yes, and let's talk about what's coming up real quick. Tuesday. That's Tuesday, October the 19th. No, that's gone already. I'm looking at the wrong date. I'm sorry. What are we on now?
So today is the 14th.
Okay, so yes,
Yes,
Tuesday,
the
October the 19th. I was correct. I did have it correct. October the 19th, we're going to be speaking on the heart and COVID-19. Dr. Matt Martinez, as well as Dr. Harry Lieber from Cleveland Clinic, they're going to be on for that discussion. So if you have any heart issues or want to know about the heart and COVID-19, that's going to be coming up on Tuesday the 19th. And then on Thursday the 21st, that's when we're going to actually speak to how private providers are preparing for COVID-19 here in the Cayman Islands. And then on the following Tuesday, we do have the date confirmed for when HSA is going to be coming on. Minister of Health will be on that show as well too. That's October the 26th. And we're going to find out how prepared the Cayman Islands HSA is for, as we, anticipate an increase in cases. And then if you want to look even further ahead, we do have that show confirmed on October 28th. And that's going to be with Dr. Jason Salami. He's going to talk about how vaccination rates impact hospitalizations. He's going to dive in some of that data as well. So we still going to keep on doing these informative sessions for everyone who, have an interest in learning how we're going to live with COVID. And we really appreciate you, watching it as well as sharing it with those who are not able to watch it live. Please tell everyone that these are available. It's always going to live on YouTube or on Facebook. Just go to the Cayman Mall Road Facebook or YouTube page and look for it there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. And big shout out again to all of our viewers who were tuned in live this evening. As Kevin said, you can always go back and rewatch. Lots of information was covered, very technical information. So you might have to watch this one twice to have it all sink in. But some interesting predictions based on the available information, as Kevin rightfully pointed out earlier. And big shout out, Kevin. I'm hoping you can join me in the morning because I'm going to be talking a little bit about the fact that, a lot of the anti-vaxxers and their little secret groups that they have seem to want to make this about me personally, and they're trying to attack me. And I think it means that we're making some headway in terms of educating the people, because normally that's when all fangs come out, right? When you're actually doing something productive. But I want us to talk about a few things and set the record straight, because they seem to think that we're getting paid to put these segments on. And, Kevin, we can give him a
Sandra, how much have you paid me to come on your segment?
I know. I was thinking this today. I mean, I wish I had money to pay you. And I think that I should do like a donation drive, because Kevin has did a fantastic job, folks. Honest to God, Kevin has not received 1 red cent. And this is the easiest thing in the world to prove. I mean, bank accounts are there if we really needed to go that far. But trust me, take my word, Kevin stepped up to the plate. He contacted me about doing this series, and he has been phenomenal. He's been spending all of his free time on this stuff. And there's never even been any discussion about compensation. Kevin's not said, well, I expect, something in my hand, like none of that. And this is what I want to talk about in the morning, because I know we'll have a bigger audience in the morning, Kev. But I want to say to people, we're doing this because we care about the community. That's what this is about. Kevin is giving up a lot of his free time, using his contacts in the US, in the industry, to really make this happen. And it's only because he cares. He is a Caymanian. He is living in the thick of COVID overseas. So he's well aware of the devastating effects that it can have. And for people to then try to somehow take that and twist it into this narrative about, oh, this is about money is disturbing, but also wholly inaccurate.
Completely. I'll have some opportunities in the morning. It won't be the full entire time because I do.
Yeah, because we've got the premier who's supposed to be coming back on as well. So maybe if we have you come up first for like maybe 15, 20 minutes or so, we can clear this up and just move on from it. Because, we can't keep, addressing these ridiculous rumors. But I thought it would be good if we could just jointly address it for once and just be done with it.
Absolutely. Well, everyone in the Cayman Islands, I'm doing this because I love you all. I really, really do. I have a passion for public service, and this is my gift to you. That's simply it. Have a good night, everyone.
All right, Kev, have a good one. Folks, thank you all so very much for tuning in. Carol says we can have a Kevin party if and when he comes home for a visit. I couldn't pay Kevin for the amount of work that he has put in and how he has really delivered some quality programming here for you guys. It's just been phenomenal. It really, really has been. And I think we're making some headway. Like, people are really paying attention and they're seeing the data. They're seeing the experts that are coming along and, speaking to people. And I know for a fact that people who were on the fence about getting vaccinated, they've now gotten vaccinated. And sometimes they don't even want to tell their anti-vaxxer friends that they've been vaccinated. But hey, whatever it takes to preserve those kind of flimsy relationships, you do what you got to do. I'm not even going to get into that too much. But folks, Carol and everyone else, MP Thomas there, thank you so much for tuning in. Exactly, Nona, for sure. We'll try to find out what's going on with some of those breaches. I do know that some are coming up for court, so perhaps we can reach out to the RCIPS for an update to see if we have any coming up in the next week or so, and kind of take it from there. But I'll definitely seek to get you an update. Again, my good people, I will see you, God's willing, in the morning. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.